And good morning on mic. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to First Parish in Concord. Whether you are here in the pews, joining from home, or watching later on YouTube, it is good to be together today, and it is good to find sustenance for your spirit and courage for the journey, no matter what day it is. Beth, do I have the power to adjust this? Arkady, could you please help with the echo? Welcome, welcome, testing, testing. How's... We'll give this a try one more time. A little bit better, a little bit better. Good, welcome everybody. My name is Reverend Liz Weber, and I'm here today with Reverend Seth Carrier-Ladd. I will hand it off to him now that we've got our mic into place.
Okay. Hello. Oh, wow. Is that? Whoa. Hello? Arkady, can you turn my mic down? To two? Two? Okay. Whew, that's still hot. Okay. I'm going to switch to the pulpit mic for a sec. We'll see if we can get that worked out. Good morning. Whether you're here in person, joining us online, or watching later on YouTube, welcome to First Parish in Concord. I'm Reverend Seth Carrier-Ladd, your interim senior minister, and my pronouns are he, him. Leading the service with me today, as she already introduced herself, is Reverend Liz Weber. Liz Weber, wow. That's not even that one. Okay. Is Reverend Liz Weber. Whew. No, I'm using this one. Oh, you are? Yes. Wow. Can we just take a minute to breathe for a second? And maybe the sound will settle while we're breathing. Okay, ready? All together. Deep breath in. Okay. Leading the service with me today is Reverend Liz Weber. And I have some news to share about Liz, news you might have seen in Friday's e-newsletter if you read it carefully. It is with great appreciation for all of the gifts that she offers to the congregation, including her gentle presence, her thoughtfulness, her wisdom, and her steadfastness, that I share with you that Reverend Liz Weber, formerly our Minister for Pastoral Care, is now our Minister for Congregational Care. We've made this change in recognition of the ways Liz's position has expanded since it became full-time 3 years ago. Liz is still your primary contact for all things pastoral care, and her role now also officially includes membership and belonging, adult faith formation and groups, and other aspects of congregational life. If you're online, please feel welcome to participate fully in the chat. If you're here in person and have questions about our accessibility or the building, please see our ushers or any worship leader. For those of you on Zoom, service information appears on slides, and we do encourage you this morning to grab a small bowl or cup of water for our ritual later in the service. For those of you here in person, we have a printed worship guide that has the chalice lighting words, the benediction, information about the music, and more, and we already have water here for you to use for the ritual. Our COVID precautions are masking in the building, distancing as you wish, and increasing our ventilation. And I invite everyone now present to stand, turn, and wave to those folks who are joining us online. However you are joining us this morning, thank you for coming. We are glad you are here. Let's see if this works. Hello? Oh, that's so much better. Yay. Our call to worship. We open with these words written by Elena Westbrook. When all around us voices are raised in anger, hatred spilling into the streets and sparking more hatred, sometimes the best we can do is to sink our hands into the soil. Let the fights over abstractions ebb away, flow like the water into the earth. Fill your fingers with dirt that is itself the product of rocks, worn to powder over millennia, leavened with the particles of other lives. Lives of leaves and vegetables and other animals, once as warm and active as you are now. Everything dies and returns to its source, breaks down into the ingredients of some new life, bits of hummus, squirming bacteria, a tiny egg. This is real. The sun warm on your back, the soil cool under your bare feet, a tiny new stem that will unfurl to grow a sweet red tomato, and the hand of a friend gently helping you to rise. Even on our most difficult days, we can touch the soil and be grateful for the earth and the love that sustain us. Come, let us worship together.
Each week, we light our flaming chalice in honor of our Unitarian Universalist tradition, connecting us to our forebears, the future, and our fellow Unitarian Universalists around the country and world. Today, we light it for all who are Jewish Unitarian Universalists in this season of the High Holy Days just past, recognizing today especially Yom Kippur, a time of atonement, a time of release, and a time of returning to ourselves and our connection with God and one another. Let us join together in our chalice lighting response. It is in your worship guide. O flame of our faith, open our hearts and fill our bodies and souls with persistent strength. Enliven our spirits and engage us deeply in this life of ours, this sacred, essential moment now. Let's rise and sing together. Our hymn is in the gray hymnal, number 215, Praise to the Living God, number 215.
So Reverend Amy is off today. She usually does our wisdom story. But it's great because that means I get to share the wisdom story with you this morning. I think this might be the first time I get to do this, which is awesome because this is one of my favorite parts of the service. And so the story that I want to share with you all today is about a woman. And this woman lived a long life. She had a family. She did all sorts of really fun things. She helped people. It was a good and full life. And as she came near to the end of her life, she decided to retire, not just from work, but also to remove herself from the active functioning of the world. She wasn't a hermit, but she went off back by herself, which some people do, right? They sort of retreat a little bit. And so she retreated into this place, and she had managed to earn some money over time. And one of the place that she retreated to there was a lake, and part of the land that she owned was an island. And over the last years of her life, she came to just adore this island. She was able to row herself across in her boat, and she had some workers come in, and they built a little place for her to rest and relax and have some tea, and she meditated there, and it just became this total haven. It was the blessing that made her big blessing near the end of her life. This was her place. And in fact, she asked that when she died, that she wanted to be buried there. And so it came to pass that she got sick, as we do when we age, and she started to near the end of her life. And before she died, she asked one of her children to bring her a handful of earth from the island because she wanted to have that space with her. She couldn't row over anymore, but this place held such a special place in her heart. She wanted a handful of earth. And so she held on. One of her children rode over, brought her some earth from the island, and brought it to her and put it in her hand. And she held on tight, right up to the moment that she died. Now, I probably should have told you beforehand that I'm not preaching the theology of this story to you all. The theology is just part of the story because she goes up to the pearly gates of heaven, right? And we all know that Unitarians have a variety of beliefs about the afterlife. So I'm not pitching heaven to you all. It's just part of the story. So she gets up to the gates of heaven. I think St. Peter's supposed to be there or somebody like that, right? And she says, here I am, I'm ready, let me in, I've lived a good life, I've done good things, I'm ready to enter. And whoever it is, whoever's there at the gates, says, we're ready to welcome you, but you can't bring anything in from the previous life, or from your life. And she says, but I don't understand, what do you mean, I'm dead, right? I'm not really bringing anything, this isn't Earth. And the person at the gate said, yes, but you actually are still holding on to that little bit of earth that was in your hand. It's still there. And she said, oh, but I can't leave my island behind. And the person at the gate said, well, I'm sorry, you can't come in. It's just you have to let everything go from your previous life. You can't carry anything in from earth, from the world. And she waited. She couldn't let go of the earth. That island meant so much to her. It was so soothing. It had meant so much to her spirit that she couldn't let go. And she was there. She waited quite a long time. She was very willful, I think the positive word is. We're not going to use stubborn, right? She was very willful, strong-willed. And eventually, one of her children who had grown old showed up at the gates and said, Mom, what are you still doing here? What's going on? Is there something, why? And she's like, I'm holding on to, I don't want to let go of my island. It meant so much to me. And such fills my soul. And the child said, well, tried to reason with her, of course, and didn't really get anywhere. And finally said, okay, well, I hope you join me, Mom, because I'm going in. And this happened with a couple other people she knew, right? And it was sort of like, wow, what's going on? And finally, and this shows you how strong-willed this woman was. I don't know how many, maybe say it was 100 years. It was a while. She really hung out, right? I mean, and besides, what is time in the afterlife anyway? But she finally decided, okay, I've seen enough people go in. I've held on to this long enough. I'm going to let go of the earth. And she let go of the earth, and the gates of heaven opened up, and there in front of her was a perfect replica of her beloved island. Oh. So that's where the story ends, right? And the moral is fairly clear, that holding on so tightly sometimes does not serve us well, even when it is a good thing, even when it has been a treasure and a blessing in our life. That there comes a time when, with many things in our lives, it is time for us to let go and release so that we can move forward and move on. Here ends our story.
If there are children is there a place for children to be released to? If there are children in the sanctuary, we're going to sing you out now, and you can go down up through second or third grade, down through those doors and down to the parish hall. And the song we'll sing is Courage, My Friend. We started it last week. The words are in your worship guide, and for those of you on Zoom, will be up on a screen. So just sing after me. Courage, my my friend, you
Finding the courage to release, especially when we're holding on so tight. Finding the courage to release can feel daunting, sometimes even impossible. There are so many things we hold on to in life. Physical things, material things among them. We live in a world of stuff, and many of us have too much stuff. Our house is so full of stuff. So much so that we now have, the new Marie Kondo method, in which you let go of everything that doesn't bring you joy in your life, because we have so much stuff. We have a tendency sometimes to hold on to our stuff too tightly, most often because it means something to us. It feels like it matters. Maybe the object or item we're holding on to holds memories and connections to a loved one, or maybe it holds memories or connections to the past, or any other number of reasons why something has meaning to us, and it becomes hard to let go. Whether it's throwing it out, passing it on, or simply releasing from our clenched grasp, it can be difficult sometimes, emotionally difficult, to release things that have been ours back to the universe. And sometimes, like the woman in the story this morning, sometimes we hold on to something so long that it causes us or others harm, or gets in the way of us moving forward onto what is next, whatever is coming next. In the case of the woman in our wisdom story this morning, she held on so tight to that earth from her island that it kept her from moving on to what was next for her next evolution. All because she wasn't willing to let go. One of the challenges we all face in life is that it's also not just things that we hold on to. Sometimes we hold on to feelings too. A great example of a kind of feeling that many of us hold on to is grudges. Forgiveness is one of those major theological themes that it's good to revisit every so often, since most of us have a hard time in different ways with forgiving. Whether it's forgiving someone else or forgiving ourselves, forgiveness, letting go of grudges, can be a tough thing to do. We often hold on to grudges and attempt to make ourselves feel safe. We think to ourselves, if I hold on to this anger or to this hurt, if I try and punish the person who did me wrong, it will keep them from doing it again. Newsflash, it doesn't. But this is the story that we often tell ourselves, consciously or unconsciously. It takes real courage to release the fear, the hurt, the anger, and to instead of trying to manage the outside, instead to seek safety from within. And it is necessary. For grudges that we are clinging on to, they get in the way of us living a full and happy life. They take up space inside of us. Grudges harm us much more than they harm the other person. Another kind of releasing that can be incredibly difficult is grief and grieving. Grief is not something we talk about very often in our culture. We tend to avoid the intensity of feeling around sadness and loss. And it's not just death that causes grief, though that is certainly a big one. We need to grieve all sorts of things, all sorts of losses. The loss of someone we care about due to death, or someone moving away, or having a fight with them, or maybe we just drift apart, but they're gone. And so many other losses. The loss of closeness with a child, perhaps, after they leave to go to college, maybe to never return to live at home again. Or the loss of a life that was created together when divorce arrives at our doorstep. The loss of a job or a community, maybe the loss of physical and or mental capacity as we age. So many losses in life, so many things that need us to grieve them. And yet it can be hard to grieve. sometimes in part because we fear if we allow ourselves to grieve that we'll lose what we had of the person entirely, or that the life we have created will never return, or that the way we used to live will never come back. Sometimes, instead of allowing ourselves to grieve, we cling to what was, out of fear of what is or what will become. We need to grieve, though. Grieving, feeling sad, mourning the loss, does not mean that what was lost is gone forever. It or they live in our hearts, in our minds, and in our spirits. It can feel so scary to release, and it is also necessary, so we can make space for who or what comes next. Now, some of you may have put the pieces together already of where this is heading. In case it's not clear, it's heading to my first charge to you this morning. Namely, that it's time to release Reverend Howard Dana. And to be clear, I don't mean to forget about him, and I don't mean to pretend like he never existed. Just like how grieving the loss of someone you love doesn't mean forgetting about them, releasing Howard doesn't mean forgetting about him either. He had a long ministry here with all of you, and you guys did much work together, did much ministry together. What I do mean is that it's time to release the parts of his ministry, to release the parts of your relationship with him that you are holding on to tightly, so that you can create space for the next settled senior minister who's coming next. And I am very clear that for some of you, that means grieving, and for some of you, that means letting go of grudges. Both of those things are okay. They're normal. There's no judgment around either of them. They simply are. It simply is. Now, grieving and letting go of grudges and forgiving, you might consider those two things opposite in nature, right? Some of you, but if we are to move forward as a congregation, if you were to become prepared to welcome a new settled senior minister, they are actually both essential for you to collectively do as a congregation over the next 2 years of settled ministry. Grieving, letting go of grudges. Now, the good news is that wherever you are, if you're here, or you're somewhere in the middle, or you need to do both, the good news is that you don't have to do it alone. The bad news is that this is your work and that I can't do it for you. But let's tackle the good news first. Whether you are needing to grieve Howard, let go of grudges you hold against him, or some of both, you don't have to do this alone. The transition team, which is a group of folks the standing committee has recruited to help us and to help me do the work of interim ministry these next 2 years, the transition team and I will be leading some gatherings and rituals that offer you a place to grieve and a place to let go of grudges, and to do it together. Now, you can, of course, grieve and let go of grudges on your own, but it often helps to do it with other people and in community. Sometimes a shared space created for the purpose of grieving or letting go of grudges can actually be really helpful. And so when you see these meetings announced, I hope you put one of them on your calendar and show up and participate, because you don't need to do this alone. And of course, if the group setting is not your preference, your ministers are also here for you. If it would be helpful to talk to one of us one-on-one, just let us know and we'll find the time to talk. Now on to the bad news, which honestly really isn't that bad. But it's true. I cannot do this work for you. In fact, no one can. I can't make you grieve Howard, and I can't make you forgive him. Nor can the transition team, the standing committee, or the staff. None of us can force you to grieve or to let go of a grudge. Only you can make the choice to do those things, to release Reverend Howard in the way that your relationship with him and your experience of him calls you to do. Friends, the spiritual work of release is a necessary part of your work in this interim ministry period. And it's also a necessary part of the journey of life. We are reminded of this by our friends and neighbors who are part of the Jewish tradition, who celebrated Yom Kippur earlier this week. Yom Kippur is the culmination of the high holy days in Judaism. It is a day of repentance, where Jewish people admit or confess their sins for the past year, with the idea being that all the sins that are admitted or repented are forgiven by God, and then released, and there is a renewal. It is one of the most important holidays in Judaism, if not the most important, and it is centered around the practice of forgiveness. This practice highlights that we all, in fact, have things in our lives that we need to release or let go of. Whether they are material objects we are clinging too tightly to, people we are holding on too tightly to, or patterns of being and behavior we refuse to let go of in our lives. So we've talked about releasing material things, and we've talked about releasing people. Let's talk for a minute about releasing patterns in our lives, especially patterns that are not serving us. What do I mean by patterns? Let me tell you a story. The story is about a tiger named Mohini. This is a true story as far as I am aware. It happened in a zoo, I believe, in or around the Washington, D.C. area. And the zoo was so excited to have Mohini be coming. They hadn't had a tiger in a while, and they were excited to have a tiger again to share with the folks who were coming. But they didn't have a proper place for Mohini to live. And so they did what you do. They put her in a small 10 by 20 cage, which was unfortunate, but they went on and did a fundraiser. That's what we do, right? When we need to do things in the nonprofit world, they did a fundraiser, and they raised the money to build a 2-acre enclosure for Mohini that had all of the things a tiger could ever want: places to run, places to scratch your claws, right? All the things. It was a beautiful, beautiful place that they had envisioned, and they raised the money. And they built this enclosure in the zoo for Mohini. And it took, raising money takes time, building things takes time. It took a little over a year for this to happen. And so they were all so excited, right? They had an opening ceremony. They opened the door and released Mohini into the space. And Mohini went over to one side near a wall and paced a 10 by 20 loop for the rest of her days. She had gotten so accustomed to that space that even though there was this beautiful enclosure, this beautiful space built just for her, all she did was she was confined by herself, right, to that 10-foot by 20-foot space. It's sad. My good friends, I would imagine, especially if you are hearing this story about Mohini for the first time, that maybe you're thinking something like this. Wow, that's so sad. What a shame. And maybe also, sad for Mohini, but I would never do anything like that. Set me free in a giant enclosure after a year trapped in a cage, and I would explore every nook and cranny. And while it's probably true if we were imprisoned like that we would explore the place, friends, we are Mohini when it comes to our patterns of behavior. We all have patterns of behavior in terms of how we relate to the world. And unless you've taken a significant amount of time for introspection, you're probably unaware of some of them, just like Mohini wasn't aware that she was limiting herself. And some of them are probably holding you back. And truth be told, even if you do take time for introspection, and even if you do the work, most of us are usually unpacking these invisible barriers over the course of our lifetimes. Because we learn ways of relating and being in the world as kids, and it usually takes a lifetime to understand and figure out what we're doing and why, and to make the shifts to change and do things differently. Here's an example from my own life. When I was a kid, I often felt overwhelmed by the feelings and intensity of emotions of the people around me. And so the coping mechanism I developed was to withdraw. Now, sometimes that meant I physically, went away, withdrew. But other times I couldn't actually physically leave, and so I would withdraw within myself, right? I'd pull back, I'd check out, I would disappear. Now, when I was a kid, without all the emotional tools an adult has at their disposal, that coping strategy worked well for me. It helped keep me safe in a way that I needed to be kept safe. The challenge for me, though, was that when I transitioned into adulthood, I hadn't examined that part of my behavior patterns. And so often, in emotionally intense situations, as an adult, I followed the same pattern and I would withdraw. Now, as you might imagine, this didn't always work well for the people in my life, especially those people I was in romantic relationships with, and especially when I got married and had kids. Guess what? When you have 4 kids and 2 dogs, there are going to be some intense moments in your life. Total surprise, I know. And surprise again, my spouse turned out not to like it when I checked out in those emotionally hard situations. Imagine that. And so over time, not that much time fortunately, I caught on, but over time I became aware of this pattern I had, this 10 by 20 invisible wall that I had created in my life, where I only had this one tool that was my primary tool that I used to respond in emotionally intense situations. And I didn't use any other options. Even though in my head, right, I was in seminary at this point. I had learned about stuff. I knew there was other ways in my head. But in the moment, I just had the one way to respond. Now, fortunately, I have broadened my horizons, and I have many more tools in my toolbox when things come up now. Sometimes, on occasion, it is appropriate to withdraw. I've kept that tool, but I also have more, including staying grounded and present, asking questions, asking if we can take a break and resume later, offering care and compassion, and more. My kids are better off for it, my relationship with my spouse is better off for it, and I am better off for it. Having broken through this invisible wall I didn't even know existed in much of my life. Because the thing is I don't want to emotionally check out when things get tough, especially not when people I care about want and need me to be present with them. I want to be there for them. That's the values I hold. That's the kind of person I want to be. But I had to see the invisible wall first, and then release that old pattern so that I could create a new way of being for myself and the world that was in line with my values. My friends, we will invite you in a few moments to participate in a ritual of release. We have with us this morning water from our ingathering water ceremony back at the beginning of September. Don't worry, it's been boiled. And we will use that water to bless the gifts we received. We use that water that was blessed with the gifts we received and the gifts we gave. And we're going to use that in our ritual of release this morning, which will include a guided meditation for blessings. So whether you choose to participate this morning in our ritual or not, the work of release is the work of our lives. We all encounter loss in our lives. The cliche is, right, that change, after all, is the only constant. We all have things to grieve, losses large and small, and we have to be willing to let go to actually be able to grieve. We also all encounter other imperfect human beings, some of whom sometimes do things that cause us harm, or we do things that cause others harm ourselves. Sometimes that imperfect human being is us. And while there may be a few of us out there who have a Buddha or Jesus nature and are able to immediately forgive ourselves and others for every bad thing that happens, most of us are going to have to struggle at points with learning and practicing forgiveness and letting go of grudges. And then, of course, most of us have patterns of behavior, some of which we are unaware of, some of which don't serve us well, some of which we might wish to change. It's hard to let go of what was so that we can grieve and move forward in our lives. It's hard to forgive and let go of grudges. It's hard to learn about ourselves and who we are and the patterns and choices we make and to shift into new ways of being. Releasing, especially when we are hurt, especially when we are afraid, especially when we are angry. Releasing, finding the courage to release, is hard. We can do it, though. You can do it. Sometimes it means doing work on our own. Oftentimes it means doing our spiritual and emotional work together. Whether that's attending a memorial service so we can grieve someone's death together, or participating in a church ritual of cleansing and release, or finding a therapist or spiritual director to help you navigate changing patterns of behavior, or even just simply talking things through with a friend or family member or fellow church member. We don't have to do it alone. And so, for your shared church community, I encourage you to release Reverend Howard Dana. Not to forget him, but to grieve him or release grudges as necessary, so that you and the church can create the space needed to move forward. And for yourself, I encourage you to release the things in your life that are no longer serving you well. Whether those are material items or grudges or patterns of behavior or perhaps even friendships, we are not meant to hold on to everything tightly. Sometimes we need to make space so new things can come in to our lives. Sometimes we just need to find the courage to release.
Into a time of meditation, into a time of imagining some release for yourself. If it feels comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes. And if not, then simply to let your eyes be gentle. Let your gaze soften. Feel yourself in your seat, supported by the chair, not needing to hold yourself up, but able to let go and rest any amount. Let your breathing come as it will, not needing it to be longer or softer, but simply allowing yourself this moment just as you are. Imagine yourself at the banks of a river. Perhaps your favorite river, perhaps a place just in your imagination, somewhere that is somehow familiar and yet always new. This river is the river of your life. Notice the steady ground underneath you, there on the shore, there on the banks. And then bring your gaze out and your senses out to the flow of the water. Notice to the surroundings that are around you, perhaps including a gathering of loved ones, a community, gathered behind and beside you. What do you need to release? What is it that you have been holding in your hands? Perhaps for too long, perhaps for just long enough. Perhaps with clenched fists in anger. Perhaps gently cupping some precious earth. You have held this in your hands with great commitment and sometimes ambivalence. And now you are ready to let it go. As you breathe, know that you are ready for release. So go ahead and hold this thing or a sense of this person or this moment in your hands. Feel the size, the weight or lightness. Feel what it is like to be holding. Notice any words that arise that you need to say. Go ahead and imagine saying them. And when you are ready in your heart and your mind to this that you have been holding, say, I release you. If it is comfortable, imagine kneeling down next to the water. Open your hands, letting whatever it is that you need to release fall into the water. Letting it go, trusting the water to carry all that you are releasing. Watch it flow downstream until it mixes and mingles into the water of your life, becoming one aspect of your past, part of the fullness and richness of the life you are living. Now turn your attention upstream. The water that is coming towards you anew. What is next? You do not need to know that yet, but simply know that there is space for all of the parts of your life. So dip your fingers into the cool water as it flows past you, offering you a fresh way forward. When you are ready, rise from the riverside, moving farther back onto the bank once more. Know that this river is here whenever you wish to revisit it. Bid it goodbye for now. And when you are ready, come back to this space, perhaps with a more conscious breath or a gentle stretch, perhaps blinking your eyes open when the time feels right. From this meditation back into community across space, here we offer a ritual to affirm the release that you have just granted yourself. We have water from our water ceremony here, and we invite you, if you are home and have water on hand, or if you are here in person, to come forward to either side of the aisles. Dip your fingers into the water and then place your hand on your heart as a blessing and affirmation of your release. May you find peace in this release. May we all find peace in this release. May our shared water remind us that we do not have to do it alone. Amen, and blessed be. Each week when we come together, we bring sorrows and joys and people on our hearts. None of you have asked to share your sorrows or joys with the congregation this morning, and so I invite you simply to call aloud the names of those you hold in your hearts and minds. Let us linger in this cloud of names and prayers and meditation for a moment of silence together. This morning, we have 2 candles to honor our commitment to justice. Our first social action candle is for Indigenous Peoples Day. As a congregation that comes out of the roots of colonization, we condemn and release the doctrine of discovery that is the legacy of Columbus. And we turn anew to the wisdom and teachings and leadership of Indigenous peoples who are guiding us in a path forward towards justice, liberation, and beauty in our world and on our earth.
Hello, I'm Brad Hubbard Nelson, and I'm pleased to introduce to the congregation the Logan Malik, who is the Executive Director of Massachusetts Climate Action Network, MCAN, who we're an organization that we're doing the Share the Plate with this month. MCAN is helping to address the climate crisis in Massachusetts, both at the state level and in communities across the state. Particularly communities of environmental justice and with municipal light plants such as ours, adopting policies to help address the climate crisis.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, hopefully not too loud. Thank you so much, Brad, for the invitation and for everything that you've done with MCAN, and thank you all for allowing me to share in this service today. It was wonderful to be here, and it's wonderful to speak with you. As Brad said, MCAN is a nonprofit organization, and we really have been focused on operating around 2 critical principles. And those principles are: it's all about local action, and together we are powerful. And so, as an organization with 65 chapters across the Commonwealth, one of whom is Concord CAN, we really work towards transitioning. We work with communities to transition their municipalities to a clean and just energy future, and we really view our role as connecting, informing, empowering, and mobilizing folks at the local level. And through this work, we're fighting for policies that will ensure that communities in Massachusetts, all across Massachusetts, and in every single community can thrive in a clean, healthy, and equitable future. The policies that we've been fighting for are many, and I could get into a long list of important things that are critical, but what I will just say is one of the things that we're fighting for is a stretch code that ensures that the buildings we build today are all electric, equitable, healthy, and climate resilient places for people to live and exist within. And the other, as Brad mentioned, is really working with the communities like Concord that have municipal utilities in navigating and transforming their local municipal utility into a climate resilient, climate action entity that is truly taking action from an energy perspective and from a justice perspective. And so that's kind of the local work that we're doing, but I want to just move to our second principle, which is that together we are powerful. MCAN truly believes that, and that is how we move in this space. Together we have the ability to take action and make the much needed changes so that people in communities across Massachusetts can thrive. Together, we can deepen our commitment to equity and justice into everything that we do in the climate movement and in our lives. Together, we can ensure that cities and towns create pathways for fair, equitable, and just transitions that meet our mandated state climate goals. And so, this collective we is everyone. It really is. It's folks involved with MCAN, folks who are learning, folks who want to learn, and folks who are operating in different spaces. And as you all go out after the service, I will be there to answer any questions. But I encourage you all to think about what in your lives you can do to be a part of this movement that together we can build, we have built, and we can continue to build into the future. So thank you all so much for your time, and have a wonderful day.
As Brad mentioned, our offering is share the plate 50-50 between the work of First Parish in Concord and the work of MCAN. The offering will be gratefully received at this time. As we move towards the end of our service, I want to invite you to stick around. Stick around all week, but especially stick around today. Today we have our coffee hour outside, which has lots of tables with things going on at First Parish. You can learn more about MCAN. You can sign up to get your picture taken for our photo directory, or sign up to help folks when they have their photo day here at church. It'll be just like back at school, only better. We also, if you would prefer, have our worship sharing circle, which is a smaller group that meets to share about how today's service has touched you. That will be out back under the sycamore and also online. A third option today is that Seth is having a time to get to know him, ask him some questions, get to know each other a bit better. That will be here in the sanctuary at 11:30. As we look ahead more broadly, I want to let you know that our COVID team is thinking that we would move towards making masks optional in church. But we want to find out more from you about how that might feel. So we're holding a listening session. The second one and final one is this Wednesday evening. Check FP Weekly for more details and the link. We also are moving ahead in all sorts of ways in worship. We are going to be experimenting with our Zoom worship structure. We've been doing a webinar format where you just see the one picture, and we're going to be experimenting with the Zoom meeting format so that you all can see each other and perhaps wave to each other through your screens, get to be able to interact a bit more. The goal is increasing our connection across space and for you on Zoom with each other, and increasing our capacity to interact. There will be a new Zoom link, which will be posted in FP Weekly, and we will be pausing our YouTube streaming at that time. More to come, but that's going to start in 2 weeks on October 23rd. Finally, a little bit more immediately, I want to invite you to an Emma's Revolution concert this Saturday here in the sanctuary. I love Emma's Revolution. I'm so excited for them to get to be here. They sing about justice and spirit. They are lively and rousing and wonderful. I invite you to come. Does anyone know if that is also streaming? It is also streaming, so I invite you to come. Everybody be here. It'll be great. Seth has our final invitation for the day.
Hey friends, it's long. We went long today. It's all good. But I'm going to keep this short and sweet. Close the gap. As you heard from Jim last week, we have a shortfall in our pledging for this year. It's $45,000. So far with our campaign, we have raised a third of that. We have raised $15,000. So thank you for everybody who has increased or renewed your pledge, who has helped us so far. Hooray. And in line with the theme of this morning, I encourage those of you who have the capacity to give more, who may help us out, to release some more money to us so that we can have the sufficient funds to pay for everything we're trying to accomplish as a church this year. So if this church, this community, this congregation matters to you, gives to you and offers you gifts in your life, we are asking you now to give us some more gifts from your life. And with that, let us rise and sing together our closing hymn, number 350, The Ceaseless Flow of Endless Time. Friends, we are finally finished. And so it is that I release you to coffee hour and to the rest of your day. As we are released from this service, I ask you also to consider, if you have not already, or to live into what you are releasing in your own life. For there is things that we need to release so that we can find peace, so that we can be free, so that we can move forward. And with that, I invite you to turn and face the camera so we can share our blessing, our benediction together. Go out into the world in peace. Have courage. Hold on to what is good. Return to no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering. Honor all beings. My friends, go and be blessed and be a blessing. Amen.